And I guess probably out of a little bit of frustration, I decided that I wanted to start making my own films. Yeah, that would be my sort of suggestion really, is to try and find a
Yeah.
way of complementing that creativity. It's not always easy. They put that track in and they thought it worked. And then they sent it to Alex Garland and he absolutely loved it.
Mm.
My one advice to people, if there's anyone out there that's scoring music, writing music, is to
So listen, mate, thanks for jumping on this. I appreciate it.
all good.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously connected, well, through my film, basically. That's how we sort of connected a while ago. But since then, I've taken like a lot of interest in what you do in your work, and I was like super impressed by it from the off. Not
Thanks,
just
mate.
with no, definitely, not just with the music, but also with your filmmaking as well. If we sort of jump back to the early days, to the beginning, I mean, what would you say that kind of was the pull for you towards both, really, sort of filmmaking and music?
It was music that came first. I'd always been, I'd always, from a young age, sort of been obsessed with music, learning music, playing music, composing music. And I signed my first recording contract when I was 21 with a label based in New York called CNS. And I think sort of like my music started sort of taking a bit more of a cinematic sort of curve. And then I just sort of became obsessed with wanting to make music for films. And I didn't have an abundance of directors ringing me up, asking me to score their film. And I guess probably out of a little bit of frustration, I decided that I wanted to start making my own films. There's a great website called archive.com or archive.org, that's it. And it's just got like loads of stuff that's out of copyright. It's completely, is eroded. So you've kind of, you've got this sort of huge database of imagery to work with. So that's what I started doing. I started just downloading films from there and trying to craft narratives with using found footage. And then my friend Andre is a really good photographer, Andre Pattenden. He sort of said he wanted to get into filmmaking, or he wanted to get into film. And he sort of suggested that, we'd do something together and then I would edit it, And that's kind of where it started, really. And even my sort of early films, Andre would film, I would direct, and then I would edit. It's still my favourite part of filmmaking is the edit, because it's where you bring the story together. It's where you can make those decisions that kind of, can grip someone in a storyline or a narrative or a documentary. How do you build the empathy?
What would you say was your influences back then with sort of music and cinema?
I would say probably Philip Glass, Brian Eno, Steve Reich, sort of these sort of composers. I was really into their music and the idea of like, Brian Eno's kind of how he talks about kind of ambient music and how he found it, I really like that idea of not having structure. And it's a bit like also with some of the films that I've done is to try and not have structure as well, because there's something free about that. There's something free about kind of not having the same like music's very formulaic. In dance music, it's all done over 16 bars, and 32 bars. There's a change, there's a drop, there's a change. It's very formulaic. And pop music's the same. Pop music's very formulaic. You have a verse, you have a chorus, you have a second verse, you have a chorus, you have a middle eighth, and then you have an outro. People like, I don't know, Steve Reich and Brian Eno. There wasn't so much. There was the kind of getting rid of that formula, and it was just about creating an atmosphere or a feeling through music, and that really struck a chord with me, really.
Was you sort of doing work outside of that, around making music and making films? Was you doing other types of work?
I mean, when I first moved to Bristol, I still had a record deal with this American label, but I hadn't really put anything out with them for a while. And I moved to Bristol and I got a job selling car insurance. Just like went to an agency, got a job selling car insurance until I sort of like, I don't know, sort of found my feet in a new city. And basically I'd always sort of DJ'd kind of like as a bit of a hobby. And then someone sort of suggested that, I think that was it. A friend of mine, a friend of a friend, had someone that was working in this bar, and they needed a DJ for the night because their DJ hadn't turned up or something. And I went and did the gig, and they loved it and gave me a sort of residency. And that was like, it's like 200 quid a week. It was 200 quid a gig, which actually is quite, in that back then it was a lot of money. And I was earning probably 200 quid for doing 40 hours a week trying to sell people car insurance. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, fuck this. So I just didn't go back to the car insurance job, and just thought, well, I'm going to see if I can get another couple of DJ gigs, and which I did.
Yeah.
And basically I did that for probably 20 years, because
wow,
in a way, like, you've got to find, I saw a really interesting, another Brian Eno, an interview that he did, and he was talking about people trying to be creative and wanting to make music, and he was saying that you have to find something that supplements your creativity. Like, it's no good working in a 40-hour week job doing something that you hate, because you're going to come home from that job, you're not going to feel inspired, not particularly creative. You're probably just going to want to watch TV or go to the pub. And so you've got to try and find something that fits. Do you know what I mean? And that for me was like the DJing was like, I could do that for 12 hours a week and get paid, and have enough money so I know that my rent's covered. And then I can spend the rest of my days perfecting my craft, really, and learning filmmaking, learning all those facets that I did sort of, back in sort of 2010. 2010 was when I first started sort of like editing and stuff. And I would never have been able to do that if I hadn't have made that kind of, I mean, I had a job which was kind of like, I had no security. I could walk into a club one day and they change the manager and he wants a different person playing there, and you've got to go and get a job somewhere else and stuff like that. So yeah, it was like, it was, it's a bit tricky. It's a sort of gig economy, but it worked for me, and it really worked for me, and it gave me the space to kind of, be creative. And I would sort of, my advice to anyone that's trying to sort of do something with their life creatively, and they're frustrated, is just try and find a way. Try and find something that supplements it. Get a part-time job that is bearable, or get a couple of part-time jobs that it's not going to totally melt your brain. Like working in a, I don't know. Yeah, that would be my sort of suggestion, really, is to try and find a way of complementing that creativity. It's not always easy.
No,
not always easy.
I was about to say it's not. It's a very kind of it's a tightrope, ain't it? Because similar to yourself, I remember back in probably around the same time, actually, around 2011, 2012, around that period, I decided to leave the security of a full-time job. To pursue filmmaking per se, but not trying to jump straight into making cinematic movies, or even I'd been experimenting with short films, still building up to that. But I decided to try and jump over at that time to try and get into. This was kind of around the time when online videos were starting to become a bit more kind of a thing for businesses to use on their website. So this was kind of before a lot of, the socials that are around now, but this was kind of around that time when it was becoming the Canon 5D Mark II had been out for a little while, and it was revolutionizing, you know, people being able to shoot content and whatnot. And as I say, a lot of businesses were trying to use this kind of stuff for their websites and things. So around this period, I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to try and jump into this. And then I spent the next 3 years trying to sort of establish myself as, I suppose, what you could call it today as a videographer, basically. Trying to run in around, making these promo videos for all kinds of like businesses, you know, so-and-so's hardware shop down the road, or a restaurant, or this place, or anything I could just get my hands on to just put these things together. I mean, funny enough, back then, you know, whilst it was starting to become something that was just beginning to take off, I was still having really hard conversations with people, trying to convince them to actually go down this road. So many business owners at the time were like, nah, this ain't gonna become a big thing, this whole like online video lark. I just can't see it. You know, we've been sticking ads in newspapers, and that works for us, and we're just gonna continue doing it and stuff. And I kind of understand it, because this was also before, you know, websites were so kind of user friendly on mobile devices and things, and it kind of was at that in between bit. But I spent 3 years chipping away at that. But I was massively, whilst I was like passionate about the actual creative and the filmmaking side of things, and it was like a brilliant kind of training ground for me to learn how to make films in a certain way that did go on later on to help me create other things. From a business point of view, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I was struggling financially all the time. I was not getting by because I was not ticking a lot of other business boxes with regards to knowing how to get work in and stuff like that, and keeping work regularly coming in, of doing this. So after 3 years of that, I kind of had to remind myself why I wanted to get into filmmaking, why I wanted to make films in the first place. And that is actually were the stepping stones that led to me towards going on to make my feature film. But to get back around to what you was just saying there, I knew at the time, in order for me to accomplish making that film in the way that I knew I was going to go about it, I couldn't get a full-time job. I just knew it would be impossible for me to do this and get a full-time job. And so I worked on construction sites on and off. I remember you saying, years. You know, but it gave me that kind of, I would do 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, just saving my money up during that time and in that little in-between period. As you say, it's hard. It can be hard to, navigate those waters.
I mean, it's great as well, really. I mean, like, you know, like knowing how you sort of came about with sort of making, you know, The Electrician, and the fact that sort of working on those sites also informed, you know, like part of the film as well, part of the process. So you were using everything around you, do you know what I mean? And also like all that work that you did with, you know, sort of like with the small businesses, that would have also sort of all informed, you know what I mean, and helped you sort of get your chops up, you know what I mean, with kind of,
100%, because as you would know, you're like a one-man band operation. You've got to run around and you've got to learn all aspects of filmmaking. You've got to like learn how to use the camera. You've got to learn how to record sound. You've got to learn how to work at speed, out and about, finding shots quickly, off the cuff, you know, while at the same time directing people. And the windows of time to do anything is like minimal. And like, you know, you do that regularly enough, in my case, 3-4 years or whatever it was, then eventually like, it becomes secondhand. How would you feel though, now that you've like the years have gone and you've got a bit older, how would you feel though about looking back now on that kind of stuff? Because I look back on that kind of stuff now, and I don't know, it's in a way I think it's madness actually. Sometimes when I look back and I think about it, I just think it's mad. Like, you know, it's just not a normal thing to do, is it?
No, probably not. No, it's probably not. Yeah, I mean, I remember I used to have like, you know, I think when you're freelancing, there's always a certain amount of anxiety that comes with it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're always kind of like, you know, looking at your bank balance. When you're really busy and you've got too much work on, I mean, I don't know about you, but I very rarely say no to stuff. I'm probably better at doing that now, but there was a point where I would always like struggle to say no to things because I'd be scared when the next job is. Do you know what I mean? So, but I do sort of like, I think now I've got kind of, you know, I don't know, I can kind of pick and choose a little bit better now. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of like, yeah, I still live with freelance anxiety. Do you know what I mean? I think every freelancer gets it. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, yeah, it's a pretty mad thing. But you know, you kind of like, I would say to anyone, you know, that's sort of setting out on their journey is you got to be a bit brave as well. And sort of, if you really want it, you just got to, you know, just you will find a way to make it work. Do you know what I mean? You just will.
Yeah, and I also think it, you know, I mean, look, there's so many other elements to it as well, and I think it kind of depends, like, why you're going into it as well, and what you're trying to get out of it and stuff like that. I mean, it's at that time it was very much kind of turning me against filmmaking. Because of those boxes, because all I was starting to connect to film and filmmaking, which was something that's been a passion of mine since I was a kid, is financial struggle, stress, negatives, too many negatives. I was starting to connect with this thing that I loved, and you know, that's why I wanted to steer away from trying to connect money to it, and I just wanted to focus on passion projects, so to speak. So you end up drifting down this road where it can sort of, I mean, obviously everyone's journey is different to us, so to speak, but one of the things I sort of mentioned now is, yeah, just be careful a little bit, because you can stray off so far off a certain track that it can really be hard to then come back around again later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to balance, I think. Like, for some people, is that kind of, you know, is the kind of the paid work that's essential. And then they get into a groove where the money's good and the work's coming in, and then they don't have any time for their own work. You know what I mean? And then that's, for me, it's like I've always got to do my own stuff, just purely for my own, you know, my own mental well-being, and also for my development, primarily as a filmmaker. I'm always going out when I've got a spare moment. I'm always going out and just filming stuff, because, like, you know, even if I'm just doing like a load of diaries, like visual diaries or whatever it is, you know, it's just, you're still creating, and it's important to keep that going. You know, the paid 100%. work is also really important. But it's really important, like you say, if you're just doing the paid work and you just become a bit of a machine, you know, like you'll start to lose your passion for it, because it'll just become like anything else. It'll just become like a job. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm lucky in some ways that I'm still creating music for myself, you know, primarily, and pretty much every bit of music that I ever create, I want to make a film for it. So I'm always in this loop of kind of doing, you know, like the non-commercial stuff for myself. And I would say that, and I would say that probably the commercial stuff is you know, is a way for me to, you know, everything informs itself as well. Like the creative stuff, that the non-commercial stuff always it always trickles down into the commercial stuff. You know what I mean? Because I'm always experimenting, I'm always trying to do different things and to try and present a narrative in a different way. And definitely with post-production, I'm always trying to be really creative with that. And that also can then inform the commercial work, because then my commercial work becomes a bit different to everyone else's commercial work. When you see, like, you know, when you work for, if someone works for brands, you know, if you go onto TikTok or Instagram and look at brand posts, they all look the same. They've all got the same editing techniques. They've all got, you know, and so it's like, so if you do something a bit different, usually, I'd like to think that people go, oh, can we do? Well, we'll do that, you know, because it looks different, visually different, you know.
Yeah, no, that's it. Well, the other thing that intrigues me about you as well is, I think we might have spoke about it before, but I've definitely mentioned it to you before. So me growing up, one of my big influences of with regards to filmmakers is John Carpenter.
Yeah.
So I was like obsessed with his films growing up and stuff, but what was also a massive pull towards his films for me as well was his soundtracks and the scores that he.
Amazing.
Amazing. And then later on, as I got older, I found that he also, for a lot of them, he created the soundtracks as well. He composed all the scores for his own films, which just blew me away even more. And it was this intriguing kind of aspect of this amazing film director who's also like this amazing film score composer. And funny enough, I think that might have kind of stuck with me because, well, it did stick with me. I know it did, and it's always been an aspect of things that I've always found very interesting. But again, years later, when it came time to making my film, and I started getting around to the music side of things, what we're going to do with it, where we're going to go with it, I ended up working with a very talented musician called Hannah Holland, who created
it's a great
the
score
original,
as well.
Yeah, she done amazing with it, and she created a completely original score for Electrician. And when we met up, when we first met up and we were chatting about stuff and whatnot, obviously I was taking an interest in her music, obviously. But the other thing that kind of massively piqued my curiosity to wanting to work with Hannah was she'd also made films.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Yeah. She'd also made short films and stuff.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So straight away, that kind of like piqued my curiosity of this could be a very interesting sort of way of going about things, of working with a talented musician who's also kind of wired like a filmmaker in the mind as well.
It's a weird one, scoring, because it's like people have a set idea of what they want it to sound like, and I always find, especially with like kind of the feature film world, there's such a small pool of composers that get used, because executive producers have such small imaginations when it comes to kind of the idea of that. They'll always go, oh, Johnny Greenwood would be good for this, or or Mickey Levi would be good for this. And it's great that there's a really great pool of brilliant composers now. Jeff Barrow, Ben Salisbury, friends of mine, Gazelle Twin, Mickey Levi, all these sort of independent film soundtrack bods that have kind of they're getting quite a lot of work now, which is good. But like I say, it's very small. There's a very small pool, and so I always find it's like whenever I've scored other people's stuff, that you get this idea as they'll approach me, because they'll be like, we really like what you do, your music, and we want it to sound like this. But the moment you produce a few cues for them that are in my style, they'll go, oh, I'm not sure about this. And you end up just going, okay, so what you really like, you want something really contemporary and modern, but actually what you really want is you just want strings and piano. Do you know what I mean?
When I think back to when I was working with Hannah on Electrician, it was a case of I kind of, explained how I kind of felt about things and what I kind of envisioned and saw and whatnot, and my kind of thoughts and feelings about things. And then I provided her with a lot of examples of stuff I'm kind of into or like, or a sense of kind of I think this, I think that, and then I just left her to it. I just I just left her alone. I was like, look, you get back to me whenever you've got some stuff. And and then she did, and it just totally blew me out of the water with the stuff that she got back to me with. And it's unfortunate as well, because there was so much stuff that didn't wind up in the final thing because you just couldn't put everything in. But so
what was the process? Because like I know a friend of mine who scored a film recently, and what they did is they wrote a load of cues, and and basically the director, he then wanted to edit to the cues rather than the other way round, which I thought was brilliant, you know, and it's a really quick way of doing it. And it's kind of like a little bit how I tend to work as well. But did you sort of like have the film, you'd sort of gave that scene over, and then she would score that scene?
Yeah, so basically the way it came about was actually Hannah got on board with the film quite late on. So the film was already quite far into being edited and stuff and whatnot. And I was using, during the editing process, I was using...
she learned like placeholders.
Just throwing any... I was just throwing any old... Not any old stuff. I was throwing in stuff that I knew I could never use. Yeah. Just as like, this is kind of where I would...
Would give a feeling,
Would give a feeling and stuff.
Yeah, perfect,
and the film was already quite far down the road. So I sent her online a rough version of the film, the complete like sort of first. Well, I can't remember what draft it was. Probably draft 8 or draft 9 or something. But it was quite far down the road. So she was able to get a very good sense of like where things were shaping up to be. And then at the time, I don't know whether or not she's still got it now, but she used to have a little studio in Margate. And I jumped on a train from London and went down to Margate, and we watched the film together, and we started like, you know, and by this point she'd already had like a few ideas that she was letting me listen to, and she was sort of playing some of the music over the film as we were watching it together and stuff. So I was starting to get a bit more of a sense of things. But to sort of come back around to answering your question, she basically was putting music to what was already laid out on the screen. But what I would say is there was a lot of stuff that when there's definitely a good few scenes in that film that I remember clearly. That after she had sent me the tracks to the music, I then re-edited the film to fit more around what she had sent me, because I thought it was I was so happy and so impressed by what she had done with it. I was like, you know what, the visuals need to fit more around that actually, because that music is so strong. I need to lean into that. So there was definitely aspects of the film where I took what she had done and re-edited it around what she had provided me with.
Yeah, brilliant, cool.
Because you have a track, don't you, a Bunsen burner that was featured on Ex Machina film.
Yeah.
So how did that come about then? What was that like, that experience?
What happened was I signed when I started sort of producing music again in 2012. I'd sort of had my music project Cuts. Jeff Barrow from Invader Records had heard, and also film composer. He'd heard some of my music and asked for like a demo. And I sent him a demo of like what would have been my first album over, and they loved it and said, you know, do you want to sign a deal with us? And I was like, yeah, it'd be brilliant, you know. And so I signed with Invader, which was great. And then and Jeff was like, wow, this one track on that he really loved, you know, was Bunsen Burner, and it was quite a short track, the original, and then just out of the blue, he came back to me one day and said, can we try this track on this scene? Because we just can't. We've been trying. We've gone round the houses trying to find the right mood for this. You know, when he gets stabbed in the back. You know, and they just couldn't find the right thing, and they put that track in, and they thought it worked. And then they sent it to Alex Garland, and he absolutely loved it. And that was that, really. That's kind of how it worked. And then, so we sort of reworked it a bit to kind of fit in that. And I think they kind of brought elements of it in, like leading up to it as a kind of hint, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was great, you know what I mean? That's how that came
it's
about,
a great track as well. And also, it's like, it's used at such a poignant moment of the film, ain't it, as well?
Yeah, it's like Ben. Like I'm eternally grateful for Jeff and Ben for sticking it in the film. Really, do you know what I mean? Because it's, you know, it's been good. It's been good PRS, which has been.
Would you say you've got a lot of work out of it?
I wouldn't say I've got. Yeah, I have got work out of it, but not. I wouldn't say like the phone's been ringing off the hook. You know what I mean? But but I've had some pretty good PRS checks from it actually. When I've really been on my arse, I was like a couple of Christmases ago. I was like, fucking hell, what am I going to do? Do you know what I mean? I was so skint. I'd like had a really terrible 6 months, no work, and then this PRS check came in because it had been shown on Channel 4 TV or something, and I was like, oh, brilliant. You know what I mean? So that was nice.
Covered Christmas.
Yeah, so that was nice. But Ben told me a funny story because obviously that won the Ivo Novello, that score. He said, and when they went to the award ceremony to pick up the award, and they played Bunsen Burner as they were going to collect the award, and they were like, "That's not actually our music." Do you know what I mean? So it was quite funny, but yeah, no, I'm grateful for Jeff for suggesting it. You know.
Would you say with some of your music there's almost a kind of dystopian quality to a lot of it, or am I way off?
No, you're probably right, actually. Yeah. Was it?
I mean that in a good way, by the way.
No, totally. No, it's all good. Like my friend Andre says that he says there's a certain amount of nausea in my music. Do you know what I mean? But in a joking in a kind way. But yeah, no, I think there probably is. You know, I don't know why that is really. I mean, I think when I was younger, you kind of get obsessed about your influences, and your influences are always kind of dominating what you do. Do you know what I mean? So you're always trying to make music that sounds a bit like the music that you like listening to, and that's really easy to kind of do that because you're almost just copying. But I think what happened when I sort of had my car accident, and I had this sort of sleep paralysis and all the rest of it, I hadn't made music. I'd been playing in bands and stuff, and then I kind of stopped making music for about 3 years, and then I had that car accident, and then I had this crazy idea of making these films, sort of like about my sleep paralysis. And then I was just kind of like sort of I was filming stuff and then scoring it on the fly. And then it became like this whole thing where I'd be doing like both these disciplines, and they're both be informing each other. And so the music became inspired by something completely different. It didn't become inspired by other music. It became inspired by images. So I would go and film. I got obsessed with kind of derelict buildings for a bit, and the decay of those buildings, because there's something really silent about them. Do you know what I mean? This sort of in this process of decay. And I would just go and wander. I would break into these buildings with my camera, film them, and then go and then just compose a load of music for it. So I guess that's probably where the dystopian sort of edge comes from. But yeah, there is that edge to it, really. And I mean, I don't know why that is. It's just sort of I don't really question it too much. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, your music's really dark," but it's just what comes out, you know. I scored a documentary about 18 months ago, and this is what I was sort of saying about never stop creating, like the non-commercial stuff, the stuff for yourself, because I'm always doing that, and I'm always scoring bits of music, and whether it's just like making a little, I don't know, 10-minute film or something. And anyway, I'd done these 2 films about 2 years ago and just put them up on, I can't remember where I shared them now. It might have been either my Vimeo channel or my YouTube channel or something like that, you know. And I got offered to do this score for a documentary, and I always thought, oh, this has probably come from sort of like Bunsen Burner. And I asked the director, oh, so how did you sort of come about my music? And she said, oh, it's from these 2 films that you made. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So that brought in work from just doing the non-commercial stuff. So doing the non-commercial stuff is really important, I think, because that in itself can breed work, you know what I mean?
Being sort of an indie filmmaker like yourself and, myself, as the years go on, you kind of realise, oh God, there's so much more you need to pay attention to with regards to sort of the stuff that has to come with filmmaking, but outside of creating the film, because you want to just focus on like the craft and the visuals and putting the film together, but you know, then there comes like the whole aspect of the business side of it, marketing, distribution. How have you found all this stuff?
Well, yeah, it's interesting, really. I mean, when I did my first documentary in 2015, a bit same as you, really. I completely self-funded the whole thing, and I didn't think of any of those kind of things, like distribution, where the film's going to end and land. I didn't think about any of that until I'd made the film. And you should always think about that before you make the film. But
Yeah.
you know, you have to kind of go through that process to learn that, really.
100%.
So yeah, so now I'd always kind of like I'd always approach something a bit differently. I would like look at it and see, you know, is this going to work? Is this going to work for broadcast? Is this going to work? Where do I want this to land? That's the most important thing, is to think about where do I want this film to land, and then do the work on getting it there.
But let's just say, for example, someone's watching this and they're trying to get into documentary filmmaking, but they, you know, want to just do something off the cuff and then take it somewhere to a broadcaster.
Like, once you've already made it, you're probably better off than just trying to sell it, license it to broadcasters. And then you can do like a licensing deal where you might be able to sell it into different territories. And you might be able to claw your money back that way. Do you know what I mean? Of the money that you've invested into making the film. But if you've got a really strong idea for a documentary, then I would approach broadcasters first. I would, really, and see if you can get a bite.
If you could go back and give yourself like some advice, what would it be, you reckon?
What advice would I give myself? It's a good question. I wish I'd have started a lot younger. Be brave, believe in yourself. Yeah, go for it. You know what I mean? Just create. My one advice to people, if there's anyone out there that's scoring music, writing music, is to find an audience and come off the streamers, because the streamers just don't pay no money. They kind of diminish your returns in your financial returns. I came off the streaming I came off all the DSPs like about 18 months ago. Nothing happened. I thought, I'd get loads more sales on Bandcamp. Nothing happened. But then slowly, I started to get regular sales on Bandcamp, and now those sales are healthy. It's not earth-shattering money, but it's regular money that comes in every month, and that was from taking my music away from the places where you think that I'm going to get most heard if I'm on Spotify. It's not necessarily true.
So what are you up to now then? What are you working on now?
I'm about to start a little project, which is a commercial project that's going to run for probably about 6 weeks, and then I've just been doing a load of visual stuff for Massive Attack, which has been great, and just trying to get better at it. I'm just always just trying to get better at filmmaking. I'm just constantly trying to be a better filmmaker. And I think Pardon?
It's something that never ends, really, though, does it?
No, it never ends, and I'm hoping that that journey of constantly trying to become a better filmmaker means that you get to make a wide variety of projects as well because of it, you know. Because, like I say, the more stuff you put out, the more body of work you can get together, the more eyes you're going to get on your work. You know what I mean? I'm hoping, like at the tail end of this year, I'd like to make a short, because a lot of my work has been documentary, or I've done lots of work for charities and all the rest of it. But like, I think what I'd really like to do now is I'd like to do a short.
100%. Yeah, I'd love to sort of, I'd love to see it. And because as I say, like we first connected, it must be a few years ago now. And you was kind of I could see it was bouncing around in your head that you wanted to sort of get this thing going. So
well, your film totally inspired me, and what your film did is, as well as inspiring me, it reminded me. Your film is a sharp reminder to anyone out there that wants to make film, is that you just got to make it. You just got to keep going and making the content and making the film and developing, and don't let anything stop you. Do you know what I mean? And your film, that's what I was saying. Like, I always thought your film should be shown in film schools all up and down the country. Do you know what I mean? Because that is real. That's actually, you can't, in a way you can't teach that, because it's like it's something that you got to get on and just do it. You know what I mean? Don't let anyone hold you back, and just find a way to make that film. You know what I mean? And I always think about that. Your film, it's always a source of inspiration. Do you know what I mean? When I'm thinking about stuff, I'm just sort of thinking, just go and do it, make it.
Yeah. No, listen, I massively appreciate that, mate. I do massively appreciate that. And that, in a nutshell, that kind of is what it is. And that's something I always say to people. It's just like, at the end of the day, trying to wait for the stars to be perfectly aligned before you, don't get me wrong, you've got to take things, you've got to plan accordingly to a certain point and get certain things, get your ducks in a row to a certain degree. Of course you have. That's silly to not acknowledge that. That's like with anything. But waiting for the stars to be perfectly aligned before you jump in with anything like that, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And it's, as you know, and other indie filmmakers watching this, the other thing is, it's like there's so many events that also don't that help you along the way, that don't happen until you get going, until you start getting that momentum going. These events, only then will they sort of, it's like an energy. If you create this kind of energy.
100%, mate.
Listen, Anthony, thanks a lot for taking the time for doing this today. I massively appreciate it, mate.
No worries, mate.
Look, as you know, I'm a massive fan of your work, both with the filmmaking aspects and the music as well. I think it's just great what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the stuff that you're going to put out in the future.
Nice one, mate. Yeah, hopefully try and get that film made. The short this year. That would be good.